today. Okay. So instead of me sending notes, if you copy, okay, you will get a very good answer. Okay. So I'll tell slowly, and if possible, you copy whatever you watch is you. Okay. So certainly let some more join because only still 12, no, not yet over. Because some quiz competition going on, they will join. So okay, okay. Hello, Sham Sundar, Chepu. Okay. No, they're joining now. Some are joining still because now we had a break of 1 hour na. 1 hour. There is a quiz competition. So there is a break. Now you're coming after 1 hour break. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. Antuna.
Good afternoon. Sham Sundar. Acha, very good. Acha. Right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. వస్తారు ఇప్పుడేగా పెట్టాము ఇంటర్వెల్ అయింది ఇప్పుడే ఓకే okay, so what is consideration? Consideration means something in return. So what is consideration? Consideration means something in return. For example, a person goes to a hotel. He has food. Under bill system, what will happen? He will consume food first and pay the bill later on. Under token system, he'll buy token first, and hotel will supply food. So consideration means something in return. You go to a theater. When you go to a theater, you buy a ticket. In return, the theater people are showing you a movie. So something in return. That is called consideration. So consideration means something in return. Then what is the Latin phrase, Latin term for consideration? The Latin phrase for consideration is quid pro quo, Q-U-I-D, quid, then P-R-O, pro, Q-Q-U-O, quid pro quo. So the Latin phrase for consideration is quid pro quo. Okay. Then what are the legal rules relating to consideration? What are the legal rules? Just as we had legal rules relating to offer, in the same way, legal rules relating to acceptance. The same we have legal rules relating to consideration. The first rule is consideration. It must move at the desire of the promisor. It must move at the desire of the promisor. The first rule, legal rules relating to consideration. First, it must move at the desire of the promisor. For example, B is trying his best to lift a heavy bag. He requests A to help. So A is helping B to lift a heavy bag. He is doing on the request of B, not voluntarily. Because he is doing on the request of B, he can get something in return. He can get something. So he is doing that at the desire of the promisor. So B can give him some money. But suppose B is struggling to lift a bag, A helps him voluntarily. Then it is not considered because it is moving voluntarily. So the first rule is it must move at the desire of the promisor. The first rule is consideration must move at the desire of the promisor. This rule must remember well. For example, B is trying his best to lift a bag. He requests A to help him. A is helping B on the request of B. So B can give something. Because why is helping? Because B is requesting him. In return, B will pay something. But suppose B is struggling to lift a bag and A helps him voluntarily. So it is not moving at the request of B. A is doing voluntary service. The first rule is it must move at the desire of the promisor. Okay? These two examples give, and they'll give a case. You all remember this case. The case of Durga Prasad versus Baldevu. The case of Durga Prasad versus Baldevu. The facts of this case were as follows. A person made some repairs to market yard. You have market like Munda market like that, Mojanjai market like that, you have market. So he made some repairs to market yard, to some shops on the request of district collector. On the request of district collector, a person made some repairs to shops in a market yard. Then the shopkeepers who occupied those shops promised to pay some commission to this person. When a person did not pay, Durga Prasad filed a case against Baldevo demanding commission because you promised to pay commission. But the court held there is no consideration. Why should he pay commission? Because he made repairs to the shop in the market. But he made repairs to the shop on the request of district collector, not on the request of shopkeeper. Therefore, the shopkeeper need not pay commission. So first two is it must move at the desire of the promisor. For example, can you two, three example? Example one. B is trying to lift a bag. A comes very hard, heavy bag. So he requests A to help him. A helps him on the request of B. So the help is coming on the request of the promisor. B will pay something. Suppose second example, B is struggling to lift a bag. A helps him voluntarily. He is doing on his own. Then B need not pay anything because the act is voluntary. So it must move at the desire of the promisor. Then there's a case in this regard. You must remember this case. The case of Durga Prasad versus Baldevo. In this case, a person made some repairs to shops in a market yard on the request of district collector. So he spent his own money and conducted repairs to a market yard where shops were there, public market. The shopkeepers entered an agreement to pay him commission because he has done a good work. He has repaired the market yard. Therefore, they agreed to pay him commission. When they failed to pay, he filed a case. The court said there is no consideration because why should they pay commission? Because you repaired market yard. But you didn't repair market yard on the request of shopkeeper. You repaired market yard on the request of district collector. So consideration is not moving because of promisor. You repaired market yard not because of the request of shopkeepers. You repaired market yard on the request of district collector. Therefore, you can't claim anything. So first rule is consideration must move at the request of the promisor, at the desire of the promisor. The second rule is it may move from the promisee or any other person. It may move from the promisee or any other person, any third party also. Any stranger also can give benefit. In English law, consideration must move only from the promisee. But in Indian law, consideration can move from the promisee or any other third party. Okay, as long as there is consideration, it is immaterial who is giving it. The benefit anybody can give. So here also there is a good case, Chinnaya versus Ramaya. So these two cases must remember, Chinnaya versus Ramaya. What are the facts of this case? An old lady, by a deed of gift, transferred some property to her daughter. One of the conditions she said is, you should pay some yearly allowance to my sister, means her mother's sister. The daughter should pay yearly allowance to her mother's sister. The daughter also same day entered into an agreement. Okay. The second rule, it may move from the promisee or any other person. The second rule is it may move from the promisee or any other person. Okay. Under English law, means law in England, consideration must move from the promisee only. Under Indian law, consideration may move from the promisee or any other person, that is, even a third party. This means as long as there is consideration for a promise, it is immaterial who is giving it. Even a stranger can give consideration. So there's a beautiful case in this regard, the case of Chinnaya versus Ramaya. What are the facts of this case? The facts of this case are as follows. An old lady transferred her property to her daughter by a deed of gift. She put some conditions. One of the condition is the daughter has to pay yearly allowance to her sister, means the old lady's sister. So means auntie of this daughter. So daughter, the same day, she entered into an agreement with her aunt, saying that I promise to pay. Then she stopped paying, saying that there is no consideration. My mother gave me land. Why should I pay why should I pay allowance to my auntie? Then the matter went to court. The court said she got land benefit from her mother, and one of the condition was she should pay yearly allowance. So consideration is moving from her mother. So she is paying yearly allowance to her auntie. In return, auntie is not giving anything. She said, I don't have to pay anything because the agreement is without consideration. The court said, no, consideration is moving from your mother, because your mother gave land and she put a condition that you have to pay yearly allowance. So consideration is not moving from auntie, but it is moving from mother, third party. So it can move from the promisee or any other person. That's the case of Chinnaya versus Ramaya. Here you have male names because in those days ladies were not coming forward to file a case. On their behalf, their male people filed case. So Chinnaya versus Ramaya case is an old lady transferred some property to her daughter by a deed of gift writing. She put a condition that she should pay yearly allowance to her sister, that is, old lady's sister. The daughter also entered agreement on the same day, promising to pay yearly allowance to her auntie, but she didn't pay. Well, then they filed a case. She said, the agreement is without consideration. Why should I pay commission, yearly allowance to my auntie? For in return, she is not giving me anything. But court said, no, even though auntie is not giving, your mother gave you the property. So consideration has moved from a third party. It is valid. So consideration may move from the promisee or any other person. That is the second rule. Third, consider it may be an act or abstinence. It can be to do something or not to do something. It may be an act, abstinence, or forbearance. Forbearance, you are controlling yourself, not doing something. So what is an act? For example, second rule is it may move from the promisee or any other person. The second rule is it may move from the promisee or any other person. The third rule is it may be an act or abstinence. What is act? To do something. Abstinence, not to do something. Act, to do something. The first rule is it must move at the desire of the promisor. First rule, it must move at the desire of the promisor. Second, it may move from the promisee or any other person. Third rule is it may be an act or abstinence. Abstinence, act means to do something. Abstinence means not to do something. You can give two examples for one for act, one for abstinence. So we'll give an example for act. A promises to pay 1 lakh to B if he paints his house, or A agrees to pay 1 lakh to B supplies materials. So it is an act. Abstinence. So X and Y, there is a transaction where X purchased goods in the past and Y gave him a bill of exchange. Now the bill is dishonored. It is worth 1 lakh. The bill is dishonored. Then X wants to file a case in a court of law against Y for dishonor of bill. Y says, I will pay you 1 lakh after 1 month. Now I'll pay you extra 5,000. Please don't file case unnecessary. You spend money on case. I spend money on case. I have to pay legal expenses, all that. So X says, okay, I will not file a case. For that, Y is paying him 5,000 extra. So for 5,000 consideration, what is consideration? Y is paying 5,000 to X. X is not going to court. Abstinence. X agreeing not to file a case against Y. Y is agreeing to pay 5,000 extra. He gave a bill of exchange for 1 lakh. On due date, it was dishonored. When the bill is dishonored, naturally, he can't go and beat him. What he can do? He can file a case in a court of law to exercise his right. Now, when he files a case in a court of law, what will happen is, Y has to pay 1 lakh, he has to engage a lawyer, he must pay his lawyer's fees, and the court will say, you must reimburse the cost of X also. It will be a very big problem. And Y is not having ready money. What he is buying? Time. He says, I promise to pay by next month without fail. Please don't go to court. I will pay you 5,000 extra. For this 5,000 extra, Y is paying. In return, what is X giving? X is not giving anything, but he is not going to court. Abstinence. So, not going to court is sufficient consideration. He is agreed not to file a case against Y. So, abstinence, not to do something. So, he is agreed not to file a case against Y. So, that is sufficient consideration. So, similarly, in the cinema field, whenever they introduce a new move, what is called heroine, so the original company, some production and all, they want to get full benefit. What they'll say is, as long as you are acting in our movie, you should not act in other banners for 1 year. So this year we'll produce on you 2-3 movies. We want to get maximum benefit. So public are crazy about new heroines. So like that. So heroine, what they'll say, for every movie we'll pay 1 crore, extra 1 crore for not acting in other banners. So when they're paying extra money, in return, she is not acting in other banner, not to do something, abstinence. So consideration can be an act. It can be an abstinence. Means act means to do something. Abstinence means not to do something. That is abstinence. That is the third rule. Then fourth rule is it may be past, present or future. In English law, past consideration is no consideration. But in Indian law, past, present, future consideration is valid. What is past consideration? Suppose, for example, X helped Y to do some work in the month of April. In May, Y says, I will pay you 25,000 for helping me. So, for Y paying 25,000, X has already done work. So, consideration is already over. In return, already work is over in the past. Because X helped Y to do some work in the month of April. In May, Y said, I will pay you 25,000 for work done in April. Now, Y has to pay. But in return, what X is doing? The contract is coming afterwards. So, but consideration is already over. Because already in April, X has helped Y. So, it is called past consideration. When one person is work already over, he has already done the work in the past, you are rewarding him now, that is called past consideration. Then what is present consideration? Present consideration means you pay money, you get material. Both the parties are doing simultaneously. That is called present consideration. You go to a shop, you pay money and buy some good. So in return, they're giving you goods. That is called present consideration. So for a cash counter, you pay cash, you get goods. So both are moving simultaneously. That is called present consideration. Then what is future consideration? So X says, I'll pay you 1 lakh. And X asks Y to supply materials this month in June and says, I'll pay you money in July. You supply materials in the last week of June, I'll pay you money in the first week of July. So it is called future consideration. So future consideration means what? The thing will happen in future. So consideration can be past, present, or future. Then the fifth rule is it need not be adequate. Because in commercial transactions, there is something called bargaining. The court will not interfere in bargaining. The court will not interfere in bargaining. So sometimes a person may be desperate. A property worth 1 crore, he may sell off for 20 lakhs. A land property worth 1 crore, he is desperate for money, he may sell off for 25 lakhs. The court will not bother. The only thing is, when it is not adequate, they will see whether consent was free or not. If the consent is free, the contract is valid. If the consent was not free, like for example, there was coercion or fraud or misrepresentation, or in that case, it becomes voidable contract. Otherwise, the court will not interfere in commercial transactions in bargaining. One person may buy a good worth 1 lakh for 10,000. Why the shopkeeper selling? He is desperate for money. He is not having any sale for 6 months. He wants some money. He may sell off for loss also. In business, many times people sell for loss also. Then what will happen? Consideration need not be adequate. That is the fifth rule. Sixth rule is it must be real and not illusory. So while consideration need not be adequate, it must be real and not illusory. What is illusory? For example, X promises to help Y to walk on water if he pays him 1 lakh. So he's getting 1 lakh. In return, he is helping to walk on water or lift a mountain or fly in air. So it's all illusory. So it is not valid. It must be real. Suppose X says, you pay me 1 lakh, I'll supply materials. It is real. But suppose he says, you pay me 1 lakh, I will help you to walk on water or lift a mountain or fly in air. Consideration is illusory. It is not valid. So consideration must be real, but not illusory. The seventh rule is it must be something. It must be something the promisor is not already bound to do. It must be something which the promisor is not already bound to do. Means it's already bound to do, then you can't promise to pay him more. The promisor is already bound to do that work. There is no point in paying extra money for that because it's already bound to do. So here I'll give you two cases. Yesterday it is only one. So I'll give two cases. One is Collins versus Godfrey. Collins, Collins, Collins versus Godfrey, Godfrey. What happened in this case was a person was requested by court to come as a witness in a case. Another person who is interested in the case promised to pay some money to the witness. Because when you go to court, the court generally what happens? The case gets postponed, delayed. You are wasting time. So he promised the person, witness, you come regularly whenever there is hearing. I will compensate you some money. Okay? But the court, for this agreement, the court said there is no consideration because whenever a person is requested to come to court as a witness, it is his duty to come to court. You don't have to pay any extra money. For the extra money, he is not doing it because he is not doing any favor. It is his duty to come to court. It is his duty to come to court. Similarly, you file a complaint in a police station regarding loss of some good. And you promise him to pay money for finding the good. That agreement is invalid because it is police officer's duty to trace the object. Suppose you lose something, you file a police complaint, and the police officer you promise, I'll pay you some money if you find the good. For that agreement, there's no consideration because the police officer is already bound to search for the object. It is his duty. Then consideration must be something which the promiser is not already bound to do. He is already bound to search for the missing object as a policeman. So your promise to pay agreement has without consideration. The second, this happened in the case of Collins versus Godfrey. In this case, a person was called by court to come as witness and tell his point. A trial is going on. Then another person who is interested in the case said, you please come regularly. Don't think of waste of time. I will pay you some money. Then that is the case. But the court said for that agreement, there is no consideration because when the court demands a person to come, that person has to come as witness. You don't have to pay anything. For the agreement, there is no consideration. So the agreement is invalid because there is no consideration. When the court demands a person to come as a witness, the person interested in the case need not pay any money to the witness. Okay? That is the case of Collins versus Godfrey. The second most important case is Ramachandra Chintaman versus Kalu Raju. So in this case, a person filed a case in a court of law. On the date of hearing the case, the client was very anxious, tension. So he met the lawyer and said, you argue well and win the case, I'll pay you extra money. You please argue the case well and win the case, I will pay you extra money. The court said for this second agreement, there is no consideration because the lawyer has to argue well for the original fees paid. It is implied that he will do his best and win the case. For doing best and winning the case, he need not pay extra money. So for the agreement to pay extra money, in return, there is no consideration because the lawyer is bound to do his best and win the case for the original fees. So consideration must not be something which the promisor is already bound to do. Here in this case, the lawyer is already bound to put in his best performance and win the case. Because the client was anxious, he said, you argue well and win the case, I'll pay you more. For the extra second agreement, there is no consideration. He need not pay. The agreement is invalid. The second agreement is invalid. The second agreement to pay extra money is invalid because there is no consideration. What is the agreement? You argue well and win the case. The lawyer is supposed to argue well and win the case for the original fees itself. So there is no consideration here. Then the eighth rule is it must not be illegal, immoral, or opposed to public policy. What is illegal? Illegal means suppose X agrees to pay 10 lakhs to B, to Y, to kill Z. So the consideration is illegal. Or a person says, you pay me 10 lakhs, I'll get you a government job. So opposed to public policy. So consideration should not be illegal, immoral, or opposed to public policy. These 8 rules, these rules are known as rules relating to consideration. Consideration means something in return. In Latin words, it is known as quid pro quo. The court will not accept any agreement without consideration. An agreement without consideration is void. It cannot be enforced in a court of law. The rule is no consideration, no contract. An agreement without consideration is void. It cannot be enforced in a court of law because the court will not allow any person to get benefit without giving some benefit in return. That is the general rule. So the rule is consideration is compulsory. Then we'll take these 8 rules are rules relating to consideration. Then we'll take about donation. When a person promises to give donation, when you give donation, you are not getting anything in return. Yes or no? When you give donation, other person, you are giving donation, voluntary charity. You won't get anything in return. Suppose you promise to give donation and you don't give donation, can the other person go to court? Because there is no consideration. When you give donation, you are not getting anything in return. So what happens in this case? So there are rule regarding this is, if the other party, for giving promise to give donation, if the other party has not incurred any expenditure, he cannot claim it. But on the basis of your promise, he has incurred some expenditure, then he can claim compensation to the extent of expenditure incurred by him. So this is regarding donation. So when a person promises to give donation, other person, can he go, if you don't give donation, other person cannot go to court because there is no consideration, because you are not getting anything in return. But suppose you promise to give donation, other party has not incurred any expenditure, he cannot claim anything. But suppose on the basis of your promise, he has incurred some expenditure, he has a right to claim that money because he acted on your promise. So he suffered some loss, he suffered some detriment. So there are two cases here. One, where a person has not suffered. Second, where a person has suffered. So these two cases always come in exam. You must remember this. The first one is Abdul Aziz versus Masum Ali. Abdul Aziz versus Masum Ali. In this case, what happened? The secretary of a mosque committee filed a suit against a person who promised to give donation but did not give donation. So Abdul Aziz versus Masum Ali. The secretary of a mosque committee filed a suit to enforce a promise to give donation. But one person promised to give donation, he did not give donation. The secretary of the mosque committee filed a case against him. The court said, you are not incurred any expenditure. Did you spend any money because you made promise? No. Then you can't claim it as a right. Even though he has not given donation, you are not affected. Therefore, you can't claim it. So, donation, when you give, there is something in return. Therefore, there is no consideration. But the second case is exactly opposite. Kedarnath versus Gauri Muhammad. Kedarnath versus Gauri Muhammad. So in this case, what happened? A person promised to give donation for repair of a town hall. For repair of a town hall means community hall. On the basis of the promise, the secretary of the town hall committee called some laborers because he was sure he'll give donation. So what he did, he started some work. So like laying foundation stone, they did some work. When this fellow did not give donation, they filed a case. The court said he is entitled to claim not full donation, but actual amount incurred. Because of the promise, you believed the promise, you spent some money. You are entitled for reimbursement of expenditure, detriment or loss suffered. You are entitled for compensation for detriment or loss suffered. So these two cases you must remember, Abdul Aziz versus Masum Ali. In this case, in both the cases, it is regarding donation only. In the first case, a person promised to give donation for repair of a mosque. He didn't pay. The secretary filed a case for recovering the donation. The court said you can't recover because you did not spend anything. Nothing happened. When you did not give donation, you didn't incur any loss or detriment. So there is no consideration. The second case, a person promised to give donation for repair of a town hall, for construction of a town hall. Town hall means like community hall. On the basis of the promise, those people thought this fellow is a rich person, he will definitely give. So what they did, they started doing some work. So they incurred some expenditure. That is consideration, because when you suffer some loss or detriment, that is the consideration. So it can be an act or abstinence or suffering some loss or detriment. That is also consideration. Because of the promise to give donation, you incurred some, you believe that promise, you incurred some expenditure, you are eligible to get reimbursement of that, but not full amount, actual amount incurred. Due to the promise, you incurred some loss or detriment, you suffered something. So you have to get compensation. But suppose on the basis of the promise, nothing has been done, then promise to give donation cannot be enforced in a court of law. The rule is, when a person promises to give donation and does not give donation, can you file a court case in a court of law? Then the rule, the two different angles. Have you suffered any expenditure incurred any loss, inconvenience? No. In that case, you can't claim it. But on the basis of the promise, you incurred some expenditure, then you can claim compensation for that extent. So, these two cases, Abdul Aziz versus Masum Ali and Kedarnath versus Gauri Muhammad. So, these two you must remember. Then the rule, the general rule, what is that? No consideration, no contract. No consideration, no contract is a rule. An agreement without consideration is void or invalid. An agreement without consideration is void or invalid. So that is the rule. But there are, means what, the law will not accept a person to get benefit without giving something in return. That is the rule. So no consideration, no contract. An agreement without consideration is void. It cannot be enforced in a court of law. But there are some exceptions to this rule. What are these exceptions? The first exception is natural love and affection, where a person out of natural love and affection promised is to do something and puts that promise in writing and registers it, then it is valid even if there is no consideration. So three conditions are important. First, there should be natural love and affection. Two, the agreement should be in writing and get it registered. Three, the parties should be related to each other, like brother, sister, mother. They should be related to each other. If these three conditions are satisfied, agreement without consideration is void. What is that? Natural love and affection. So there's a good case here. Venkataswamy, this case, remember, Venkataswamy versus Rangaswamy. In this case, a elder brother promised to repay the loans of his younger brother. Out of natural love and affection, he filed, he also prepared agreement, he got it registered. The court said he is bound because even though younger brother is not giving anything in return, elder brother is bound to honor the agreement. So, in Venkataswamy versus Rangaswamy, okay, that is first one, natural love and affection. Second is compensation for voluntary services. When a person does any voluntary service, you need not pay any compensation. But if you promise to pay, you have to pay. So, compensation for voluntary services. A finds B's purse and gives it to him. B promises to pay him 100 rupees. He has to pay. So, compensation for voluntary services. So, A was drowning in a river. B helps him and saves his life. So, A says, I will pay you 10,000. He has to pay. So, compensation for voluntary services. For voluntary, you don't have to pay. But if you promise to pay, you have to pay. The third is promise to pay time-barred debt. What is debt? D-E-B-T. Debt means amount due. Suppose a person, a debtor, has to pay 1 lakh rupees to a creditor. You must recover it within 3 years of due date. After 3 years, the debt will become a time-barred debt. This you must remember. What is that? When a person is due money, it is called debt. The debtor has to pay the money to creditor before due date. Then the creditor has 3 years' time. Within 3 years' time, he should file a case and recover the money. If he does not recover the money, he loses. It means the debt should be repaid within 3 years of due date. At least the creditor should have filed a case. The case can go for 20 years also, no problem. But within 3 years, the creditor has to take some action. If he does not take action, the debt will become a time-barred debt. Time-barred debt means you don't have to pay. Suppose X is due 10,000 rupees to Y. The debt is due on 1st January 2014. Due date is 1st January 2014. In 21 also the money is not. So till 17 he must recover. The money should be recovered before 2017, 3 years time. After 3 years, it becomes a time-barred debt unless the creditor has filed a case in a court. If he has not filed a case in a court, the debtor need not pay the money. That is called time-barred debt. Now, suppose a person promises to pay a time-barred debt. It also, consideration is not necessary. The fourth rule is completed gift. Whenever you actually make a gift to a person, that person need not give you anything in return. When you say gift, It is gift free only. They use the word free gift, but gift is always free only. So when you give a gift to a person, that person, no consideration, no contract, does not apply to completed gifts. The fifth one is agency. No consideration is necessary to create an agency. If you want to appoint a person as agent, so there is no need of consideration. And whenever there is any charitable subscription, like you give any what is called charity, there is no need for consideration. So charitable subscription, provided other person has spent some money, so there is no need for consideration, because the detriment itself becomes consideration. Okay, so these are the exceptions to the rule. No consideration, no void. No consideration, no contract. Comment. So what is the rule? No consideration, no contract. Now next class I'll give you all old question paper. We'll solve the cases given in the exam. Okay, same two questions have come. Now I'll ask you all what is the answer. One is what is consideration, what are the legal rules related to consideration. Next question was no consideration, no contract, what are the exceptions to the rule. And the two cases. Now next class we'll solve the cases given the exam, latest exam. Last February your seniors have written. Okay. So you must tell me the answer. I'll just post you all the question paper. So you must tell the answer on the basis of what we discussed today. Okay. So enough for today. Anyone will what is time barred? Very good question. What is time barred debt? So debt means due. DEBT. Debt means due. The creditor must recover the money due from debtor before due date. After due date, he has 3 years time. If it is not recovered within 3 years, it becomes a time barred debt. For example, X purchased some goods from Y in 2014. The due date for paying the money was 30th June 2014. Now, the creditor must recover the money before 30th June 2017. Within 3 years, if you don't recover, the debt becomes time barred. You cannot recover. So 3 years time, within 3 years of due date, the money should be recovered from debtor. If it is not recovered, the debtor need not pay the money. It becomes a time barred debt. Then what is then in that case, but if, suppose he filed a case, the case can go on. He has done something. He has done something, then this 3 years won't apply. It may take 10, 20 years also, he'll recover the money. But he has not, creditor has not done anything. He kept quiet for 3 years means he will lose the right to recover money from debtor. That is called time barred debt. But suppose the debtor X purchased some goods from Y for 1 lakh in 2014. Till 2017, the creditor did not recover. It has become time barred. In 2021, the person, because to maintain friendship, he says, okay, I have to pay you 1 lakh, I'll pay you now. He need not pay 1 lakh, but he's paying 1 lakh. In return, the shopkeeper is not giving anything in return. But a promise to pay time barred debt, in that case, the rule will not apply. Then agency. Whenever you want to appoint an agent, he need not give anything in return. So no consideration, no contract does not apply to create an agency. Agent means what? You appoint one person to sell goods on your behalf. For that, there is no need of consideration. If he sells the goods, you pay him commission. That's all. Okay. So no consideration is necessary for creating an agency. So these are the 6 exceptions. 5. First exception is natural love and affection. Second, compensation for voluntary services. Third, promise to pay time barred debt. 4, completed gift. 5, no consideration necessary to create an agency. Okay, these are the exceptions to the rule. Okay, so I'll send you all question paper Monday. We'll discuss these questions. The 2 cases only. Okay, then we'll go to next chapter. You all must, I'll post that. You must think and give me answers. So 2 cases which came in exam, you must learn how to apply your mind and give answer for that. So only one batch has taken place. That is your seniors have written exam first semester in the month of January. So that question we're having, I'll send on Monday. We will discuss the cases given in that paper. Okay. So enough for today. Okay, enough.
Thank you.